All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session from Burwood Group. My name is Colleen Berry. I am Burwood's Marketing Director, and I am very pleased to introduce today's session on Windows Desktop End of Support Strategy. This webinar is being recorded. We'll provide a recorded version of this webinar and the presentation slides to all registrants and attendees within 24 hours after this event. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's presenter. Chad Price is a technical architect with Burwood Group's digital workspace practice. Chad has several years' experience working with Burwood clients to select, design, and implement architectures and technologies in the end-user compute space. Personally, I've been with Burwood about 10 years and have worked with Chad countless times. His technical acumen and aptitude is a great asset for our clients, and I hope that all of you will get to experience that as he walks through his strategic recommendations related to Windows Desktop and Office support strategy today. So we've allocated about 30 minutes for today's topic. Chad will kick us off with a short presentation, followed by open Q&A from all of you. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to send them to me, Colleen, during the chat, within the chat application, and I'm happy to ask on your behalf during or afterwards. Once Chad finishes the presentation, I'll go ahead and unmute all lines to encourage direct Q&A participation, as well as ask myself any questions I've received during the chat. So for those just joining, welcome to this webinar on Windows Desktop End of Support Strategy. I'll now introduce Chad Price, Technical Architect at Burwood Group and today's presenter. Chad, please take it away.
Thank you, Colleen. So yeah, today we're going to talk about the desktop end of support strategy, and that includes Windows 7 as well as Office 2010. Just a quick update about myself. I think Colleen did a nice job. I've been with Burwood for around 7 years, but my area of focus is really around business strategy and architectural design within what Microsoft now calls modern workplace. A lot of that deals with end-user computing strategy. If you go to Burwood's website, you'll see a digital workspace, and end-user computing, modern workplace, things like that will fall within what Burwood calls our digital workspace. So that's really my area of focus and specialty. I've been implementing these types of technologies that are Microsoft related, as well as Citrix and VMware technologies, since 1999, so have quite a bit of experience in a consulting role doing these types of deployments. So with that, that's about me. The agenda for today's webinar is really talking about what end of support from a desktop OS means for organizations such as yourself. What are your upgrade paths? We'll go through some kind of recommended upgrade paths for desktop as well as Office, and I'll run through some common questions that we get, and then from there we're going to open it up for Q&A. Anything that we haven't addressed, anything that's on your mind around desktop or Office migrations to the newest versions, we'll do our best to answer your questions. If for whatever reason we don't have those answers, we'll certainly document them and get back to you the appropriate answer. So with that, let's move on. Here are two key dates that you probably are already aware of, but just want to make sure we point these out. From a Windows 7 perspective, the end of support deadline is January 14th of 2020. So that essentially means that's the end of support. Now there's some alternatives or some options you have that I'll get into in a few minutes, but that's really the drop dead date from Microsoft. Office 2010 is October 13th of 2020, so a little over a year from now. But from a desktop OS, you know, we're only looking a little over 4 months out before that end of support actually kicks in. So those are two important dates that you should make sure that you're aware of and that you are properly planning for. So I think it's interesting and important to understand what does this really mean. So if we look back at a Microsoft Lifecycle Policy, it's typically 10 years of support. So you're going to have your typical 5 years of mainstream support, and that's where you're going to get feature enhancements, service packs releases, not only bug fixes, but the typical hot fixes, patches, and updates. Those are going to be critical, important, standard features, things like that. Past that 5 years, that's when the extended support kicks in. And then once you've reached that extended support, which we'll be at in January of 2020, and that's when no technical support, no software updates, no security updates are going to get applied to that. So if you have the risk tolerance of still deploying Windows 7 past that time frame, just want to make sure that you know that you're exposing yourself to serious security risks, because a lot of times what you'll find is things like malware, ransomware, things like that are targeting those end of support types of operating systems as being vulnerable because they're no longer being patched. Office, I don't anticipate any type of an extension on Office and or Windows 7. So Office, again, October 13th of 2020. So now let's talk about upgrade paths. So what are your options for upgrading from Windows 7 and Office 2010? Your first option, obviously, is to deploy all brand new devices. Probably not cost effective for a lot of organizations, but it may be required for some. There are older devices that are out there that are running Windows 7. They may not meet the minimum system requirements for the Windows 10 operating system, whether they're lacking RAM or CPU power or even just older equipment that's off maintenance. It may require you to lay down new devices and then deploy the operating system on those new devices. Or if you're thinking about a BYO strategy, might be a good opportunity to leverage the BYO strategy for that typically those are going to be deployed with Windows 10 as well. Your other option is to do more of a in-place upgrade to Windows 10 Professional. So if you do have devices that support the system requirements, you can just do a typical Windows 10 upgrade. Same thing with Office. Migrating from Office 2010 to Office 365 would be the preferred route. The alternative to Office 365 then would be Office 2019. In large enterprises, you're going to see or probably have seen projects around deploying the Windows 10 Enterprise, and that's really around the Microsoft 365 suite, which that 365 suite incorporates Office 365 as well as Windows 10 and adds on the EMS capabilities, and that includes Microsoft Intune plus the security elements of that. So a large Windows 10 Enterprise deployment would most likely account for all of those. The other option that is become viable here in the last month or so has been around Windows Virtual Desktops, or you'll commonly hear it referred to as WVD. So if I have a need to still continue to support my Windows 7 devices in a supported fashion, if you will, for your organization, WVD might be a good option for you in that you can relocate those Windows 7 operating systems within Azure under WVD, because WVD will provide you the capability to run a Windows 10 single session OS, a Windows 10 multi-session OS, Windows 2012 R2, in this case, a Windows 7 single session OS. So WVD could also be an upgrade path for some organizations where it makes sense. So with that, I'd like to start going through some common questions that we get along with Windows 7 and Office. The first one is, what is the recommended path for Windows 7? And the simple answer, not feasible for everybody, is doing a direct upgrade. Alluded to just a few minutes ago around equipment not being able to have the necessary requirements to support Windows 10, so that would not be an option. But as you continue to replace equipment, add more hardware to existing equipment, then it may make sense doing a direct upgrade. But that's typically the recommended path. What about Office? What is that recommended path for Office 2010? Upgrade directly to Office 365 Pro Plus. I think the biggest caveat for Office will typically be your Excel applications that you have developed using VBAs, macros, those kind of things. Word is, Microsoft Word is typically not an issue, neither is the mail application, Outlook or PowerPoint, but you'll probably need to go through application compatibility testing on your Excel-related applications from 2010 to Office 365. And if you go through that and you find that everything is compatible, then a direct upgrade to O365 may be your best option there. The other common question that we get is around Windows 7 activation. So the thought process around this is if you are either higher ed or if you're an organization that has training classrooms or lab environments that are secured, isolated, maybe they don't have access to the public internet, so security is of less concern because it is completely isolated and contained. Can I continue to use Windows 7 and continue to deploy that, and will it be activated and still fully functional? Common question, or the answer to that is yes. It can be installed and activated even after that. But again, it's going to be unpatched past that time frame, meaning past January 14th of 2020. So if it is isolated, contained, lab environment, training, something like that, those applications that are business critical that you need to have your employees or associates be running, and you don't have that upgrade path defined yet, then that could be a use case there. What are your options past the January 2020 deadline? And this is really for the Windows 7 operating system. So what do you do if you aren't prepared to go to Windows 10 at that particular point? Well, your option for Windows 7 Pro and Enterprise, so if you own Windows 7 Pro and Enterprise, you can purchase from Microsoft the extended security updates. So those are annual and they're for up to 3 years. So you can go through January 14th of 2023 with these extended security updates, only if you have Windows 7 Pro and Enterprise. Those extended security updates, I believe, began selling April of this year. So if you decide that you need to switch over and buy these extended security updates starting January 1 of 2020, then you'll have to buy all the past updates as well. So keep that in mind. But you do have options to extend the Windows 7 OS through those extended security updates. Keep in mind, those extended security updates are only going to include critical and important updates as deemed by the Microsoft Security Center. So it's not going to be any kind of bug fixes or anything like that. It's going to be the critical and important updates only. So should I consider the Windows Virtual Desktop? Alluded to this just a few minutes ago. It might be a good situation where if you wanted to stand up a virtualization solution within Azure and you have some business critical applications that are running on Office 2010 suite along with Windows 7, and you don't have the time to get converted by the timeline, then moving those workloads into Azure under WVD, that's going to give you end of support transition utilizing the Windows 7 operating system. So WVD might be a good use case in that situation. So from the endpoint itself, then that's when you could consider moving to a thin client type of technology, a read-only, a zero client, BYO strategy, things like that. So at Burwood Group, we've been working with customers around desktop replacement strategy, specifically for Windows 10, and leveraging read-only types of thin clients has been a viable solution for some of our clients we've been able to help. Moving on, what are some of the tools available for migration? I'm sure some of you have already experienced some of these tools, but commonly, from the Microsoft toolkits that you can find, if you just search for Windows 7 end-of support, you're going to get a slew of information, and part of that will be these toolkits. So you have the Office Readiness Toolkit, validate that your current Office delivered applications are compatible. You can leverage the Windows Analytics and see if there are potential vulnerabilities for your applications or for your endpoints that you want to try and upgrade, do an in-place upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Are there known kind of vulnerabilities or issues with this specific hardware? Leveraging Windows Analytics for that. Desktop App Assure and Windows Autopilot, either through your resellers of your endpoints or through OEM manufacturers. You can leverage Windows Autopilot to become more of a self-service, install the desktop and let that user self-service and be up and running within just a matter of minutes, leveraging Autopilot. So those are some of the common tools we see with the Windows 7 migration. Can I get a free upgrade to Windows 10? So as you probably already know and are aware, the Windows 7 to Windows 10 typically is not free. You're going to have to pay for that upgrade. But if you decide that, hey, I'm going to Office 365, I'm going to go to Microsoft 365 Business specifically, you get a free upgrade for all of your users that have a device running the Pro license, Windows 7, Windows 8, or even 8.1. So all of those endpoints, those licensed devices, you can upgrade to Windows 10 at no additional cost. However, if you're doing OEM on Windows 7 and you need to go to just standard Office 365 Pro Plus, there's going to be a cost associated with that. So what does Microsoft 365 include? You'll hear the terminology from Microsoft called Modern Workplace, but Microsoft 365, that includes your Office 365, that includes the Windows 10 operating system, as well as the enterprise mobility and security elements of that. So enterprise mobility you'll probably refer to a lot as Intune. So that includes, your Office suite, the desktop OS, and Intune for enterprise mobility and management and security elements. So those are some of the common questions that we get asked a lot around the desktop and Office migrations. So hopefully that was helpful. So at this point, we're about 20 after, so I'd like to try and open it up for any kind of Q&A that anybody may have.
Excellent, thanks, Chad. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line, so if you're in a loud location, please be conscious of muting yourself. Everyone.
Hi, this is Jonathan Barrett with Orbis. I have a few questions.
Hey, Jonathan, long time no talk.
Hey, Chad, remember me, huh? Great.
Yep.
Question one, does the VDA license still exist if we go virtual desktops?
It does.
All right, so that was the big penalty for most companies trying to do virtual desktops, is that cost offsets the return on investment. Is it still one-for-one, or is there, is there a way to get some economy of scale built into those?
Well, that's the kind of the enhancement of the Windows desktop into the WVD. So now you can do multiple virtual sessions within a desktop operating system, just like your old terminal services, but now you're running on the desktop OS. So you'll probably see some numbers. There are some calculators. There's an ROI calculators, and we can send you some links and on the ROI calculator. That can include some WVD statistics, but it's still relatively new to sort of show you true cost savings on that. May be hard to do at this point, but it's certainly something you'll want to run through and validate against what a typical VDI is, meaning a single session VDI versus a multi-session VDI. I think you'll find the WVD will be more cost effective than the single session VDI.
All right, and then the second question I have is, with SA, I know we're entitled to do Windows 10 Enterprise with software assurance. Does that open up the extended support for Windows 7?
Open it up? No, you still have software insurance, but the extended security updates would have to be purchased above and beyond that.
I thought back in the Windows XP to Windows 7 world, when you had the software assurance for Windows 7, that extended Windows XP support. So I was wondering if that replicated over to Windows 7 to Windows 10.
No, and in regards to the support, if you own unified support, that will still be active on the Windows 7. If you go the extended support, you can still call in and get under that unified support contract. But under typical Microsoft support contract, there will be no support past the 2020. Now, you can open up a support ticket with Microsoft. They can try and resolve your issue, but they're not going to do a root cause analysis, and they're not going to do any bug fixes for you.
All right, so are those Windows updates with extended, do they recognize you by your IP, your corporate IP, to allow those Windows updates through? Does it have to be something special done with SCCM?
I don't know the specifics behind that, Jonathan, but we'll get back to you on that one.
Just curious. Did you have any questions? No?
I'm good.
All right. All right. Well, it's good talking to you. Are you doing tomorrow's session?
No, we'll have a couple other gentlemen doing tomorrow's session.
Okay. Well, if you ever want to catch up, I'm on LinkedIn, so.
Great.
All right, sir. Good talking to you.
You too. Any other questions we may have?
Chad, I have a few that have come in over chat, so I'll jump in with those. Can you speak to Internet Explorer? Will that still be supported on Windows 7?
Internet Explorer latest release, IE 11, will fall under the same guidelines as Windows 7. So Windows 7 end of support, January 14th, 2020. If you're running IE 10, for example, support, you'll need to go to IE 11 and then fall within the extended support if you decide to purchase that. But it would, again, fall under the same guidelines as the operating system it's running under. So going to Windows 10, the default browser being Edge, and now Edge based on Chromium, that would be the preferred method from Microsoft.
Great. And then another on Windows Embedded. Does the end of service apply to Windows Embedded 7 as well?
It does. It'll follow the similar timelines as Windows 7. So if you have thin clients that are running the Windows 7 embedded, the dates are pretty much in line with one another. So you can count on January of 2020 for Windows 7 embedded, whether it's Pro or Standard. There are some other variations of that. But going through the extended support on Windows 7 embedded, you'll want to check with your OEM or your manufacturer of those devices and find out if they're providing support beyond the January 2020 deadline as well.
Great. And then last one from me, just general uses. What happens if we continue to use Windows 7?
You can continue to use it. It'll still be activated. It'll still be fully functional. The issue that you have with that is exposing your organization to serious security threats. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest drawback to that would be having hackers, malware, ransomware, viruses, worms, things like that, that are typically going to be targeting unpatched or unsecure operating systems. And they're going to be targeting those that are out of support or they know that they haven't been patched in a while. So you're running a high risk of exposing your organization to those types of security threats. So it is advisable to switch over to supported operating system that can be patched on a routine basis, whether that's Windows on the endpoint, then client read-only on the endpoint, or some other mechanism.
Got it. Thanks. A couple minutes left. Any final questions for Chad before we wrap today's session?
Well, great. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Hopefully, you got a little something out of this quick webinar. Our contact information is here, so don't hesitate to reach out. And I believe, Colleen, you will forward on information for this webinar.
Yes, absolutely. I will send the recording and presentation deck to everyone attended within 24 hours. If you did like today's topic, I would strongly encourage you to join us tomorrow, the second webinar in this series, focused on Microsoft Server and Exchange end of support strategy. Thank you, Jonathan, so kindly for plugging that for us already. I've just put in the chat link the registration link for tomorrow's webinar, so just click right there if you want to sign up for that as well. And feel free to connect with me or Chad directly with more questions, and connect with us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well to see more of our content and recommend additional webinar topics. We always welcome new suggestions. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you, Chad, and thanks everyone for joining Burwood Group today, and hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks.